When I meet somebody who claims to be religious, my first impulse is don't believe you. I don't believe you until you tell me, do you really believe, for example, if they say they're Catholic, do you really believe that when a priest blesses a wafer, it turns into the body of Christ? Are you seriously telling me you believe that? Are you seriously saying that wine turns into blood? Mock them, ridicule them. In public, don't fall for the convention that we're all too polite to talk about religion. Religion is not off the table. Religion is not off limits. Religion makes specific claims about the universe which need to be substantiated and need to be challenged and, if necessary, need to be ridiculed with contempt.
Just in March, Richard Dawkins and others were on the Mall in Washington, D.C. for their Rally for Reason, an atheist march. 10,000 showed up. And Dawkins told the crowd they should ridicule religious people. Let me quote him. He says, mock them, ridicule them in public. Their beliefs are insane, therefore they should be ridiculed with contempt. It appears he's reading from an old script that goes all the way back to Hosea, isn't he?
You know, when I heard that and read this, I read it hours before my talk at the University of Hawaii. And interestingly, that the University of Hawaii has one of the leading departments globally on world religions. Some of the finest minds years gone by used to use some of their writings and so on. I began my talk by saying I support what Dawkins says, that we should ridicule people with religious belief. And I would recommend that he begin that statement in Saudi Arabia and let him start. And the audience just roared, you know, so there was maybe nasty comment to make. He is really complimenting this society of Christians by saying things like that because he can say it with impunity. I dare him to go to Saudi and do that. I dare him to go to Iran and do that. The least he will find out is that not all religions are created equal. So to make a statement like that, he reminded me of two other things. I remember as a youngster, I think I mentioned it in one of my books, I was in the city of Nagpur. I was in my 20s or early 30s preaching, and I saw a crowd gathering. And I wondered what was going on, and people were laughing and slapping each other on the back. I gathered around I thought some magician was doing his tricks. It was an insane man. It was a man who was unclothed, literally with stones and stuff, scratching himself, dancing, behaving in a sad way. And I remember my eyes filling up with tears, and I thought to myself, is this really some form of entertainment to laugh at a madman? If he's telling us our ideas are insane, what does mocking do? If it's an insane idea, what does mocking really do? But there's something deeper with what he is doing philosophically. Two things. Number one is this. He goes on in endorsing a most recent book that has been written, that we now have the answer, how something can come from nothing. And it's this age-old, rehashed quantum vacuum that out of which pops up some kind of a particle that, you know, can explain the existence. First of all, it's a misuse of what a quantum vacuum is. No quantum theorist actually tells you that a quantum vacuum is nothing. It's not no thing. There is a pattern, there is the subatomic activity that is going on, so it's not nothing. But suppose it is nothing, meaning no thing whatsoever. What does that do to atheism? I thought atheism's entire definition was everything that is matter. It is a materialistic framework from start to finish. But if the starting point is nothing, then it's not a materialistic framework, it's nothing. And if you're starting from nothing to explain everything, then why not end up in nothing, including meaning? So who's to be mocked here? He's the one who wants to talk about the wonder of beauty and all of this coming out of nothing. That's the insane idea then. That's the thing that needs to be mocked. He's making something out of nothing, making it appear to be nothing, out of which he wants to build everything. It violates the very fundamental starting point of atheism. So even if he is taken practically, I dare him to do it in a counter perspective like Islam. If he is doing it equivocatingly, then it is not nothing, it is something. If he is mocking something insane, then the insanity actually lies on the side of the mocker. Everything he calls for there violates reason. But this shows you who Dawkins is. He is driven by hate. And that's why many respected atheists want to separate themselves from him. Even secular thinkers took issue with that statement of his and called him to task on it. Dawkins is an angry man, and one day that anger will catch up with him. In a world of civility, you do not mock a counter-perspective. You dialogue with a counter-perspective. You mock a counter-perspective, you provoke the baser instincts in a human being. And somebody violent out there will want to get even with a comment like that. He's playing a very dangerous game.
I was reading an email this morning from one of our Let My People Think listeners to you, pointing out that when they present the gospel to atheists, as they put it, they're attacked by a pack of vicious, rabid dogs. So it's already happening. So what would you recommend to people who find themselves in a position where atheists are mocking them in this way?
Yeah, you know, once upon a time, all of my answers would be very ironic, very warm, very cordial. The older you get, you tend to react, and I'm not sure it's the wisest way. You know, I also have to back down some time and saying, is this really a shouting match? What is the end in sight we desire? Are we desiring the winning of the person or the decimation of the person? We are seeking the winning of the person. Let me give you an example of this. I may have used this at some time. I was speaking at the University of Malaysia, or I think it's called Malaya. It's the oldest Islamic university in Malaysia. And a professor of geology, he's a Christian gentleman, came to me and he told me this story. I wish I could remember his name. It's something like Gentle Lee or something like that. Very fine man. I'm talking several years ago. He took me out for dinner. He said Ahmed Deedat, the Muslim debater who's passed away from Durban, South Africa, who was taking on all comers, he came to speak at that university and he mocked the Christian there. And this gentleman stood up and he said, why are you mocking Christianity? And the man said, because it's a farce. He said, nobody can live the Sermon on the Mount. So Professor Lee said to him, why do you say that? He said, come on up here. So Professor Lee walked up to the front, and the man slapped him across the face. Ahmed Deedat slapped him across the face. He said, turn the other cheek now. And Professor Lee told me, he said, Ravi, my face was ringing with that slap. And I turned the other cheek to him. He said, Deedat didn't know what to do. The audience was packed. He said, all right, I won't go that route. But the Bible also says if a man asks you for your tunic, you know, give him your cloak also, whatever. He said, take your trousers off for me. And Professor Lee told me this himself. He said, I looked at the audience, many of my students in there. I said, please forgive me for doing this. And he took his trousers off and was standing in front of the audience in his underwear. And Deedat was just mocking and laughing at him. And then he picked up his clothes, walked out of there. He said, Ravi, my office was lined up with Muslim students the next day, begging for forgiveness for what was done to me. And you know, this kind of nonsense that Dawkins is propagating is exactly the kind of stuff has been tried. It's nothing new. And you really end up looking foolish when you mock somebody's faith like that. There are many beliefs in the world I do not agree with. But if I were to encourage people to mock the person the way he is calling for it, here's the point. In the Christian faith, there's an egalitarianism of people and an elitism of ideas. People are equal, ideas are unequal. Let ideas be pit against each other, but don't take away the egalitarianism of the person. Don't rob the person of his dignity or her dignity. Take the idea, take it to its logical outworking. That's not mocking it. That's reasonably interacting with it. But if you're mocking an idea, you really don't mock an idea. You mock a person. Because the idea doesn't care if it's being ridiculed. The person does care. And I think Dawkins is on a wrong track, and I think sooner or later he'll take a back step and try to recast this in exactly what he means. But the true ideas that he has really are to mock people and denigrate them. This from a man who studied in an institution where the motto was, who taught an institution where the Lord is my light. And if they had mocked him, they would never even have given him the position to teach. He ought to return the compliment by showing respect for people who disagree with him. In a world of hate, mockery will engender more hate. And if that's the world he wants, that then tells you what his brand of atheism actually is.
Talk about religion. Religion is not off the table. Religion is not off limits. Religion makes specific claims about the universe which need to be substantiated and need to be challenged and, if necessary, need to be ridiculed with contempt.
Heard that and read this. I read it hours before my talk at the University of Hawaii. And interestingly, that the University of Hawaii has one of the leading departments globally on world religions. Some of the finest minds, years gone by, used to use some of their writings and so on. I began my talk by saying I support what Dawkins says.
Just in March, Richard Dawkins and others were on the Mall in Washington, D.C. for their Rally for Reason, an atheist march. 10,000 showed up. And Dawkins told the crowd they should ridicule religious people. Let me quote him. He says, mock them, ridicule them in public. Their beliefs are insane, therefore they should be ridiculed with contempt. It appears he's reading from an old script that goes all the way back to Hosea, isn't he?
You know, when I heard...
Are you seriously telling me you believe that? Are you seriously saying that wine turns into blood? Mock them, ridicule them. In public. Don't fall for the convention that we're all too polite to. When I meet somebody who claims to be religious, my first impulse is don't believe you. I don't believe you until you tell me, do you really believe, for example, if they say they're Catholic, do you really believe that when a priest blesses a wafer, it turns into the body of Christ?